Hello, and welcome to MyExpertSolution. Today's presentation is going to be basically a summary or a condensed version of a webinar we've done, Strategies for Stress Relief. As we get started, let's first look at our goals. As you can imagine, any of our goals are going to have to do with stress, but they may be a little different goals than you expect. Our first goal is going to be, if you don't have any stress, we actually want to give you some. Because what you're going to learn today in this webinar is that stress is sometimes very useful. But if you have too much stress, we want you to drop some, to get rid of some of it. Because you already know from your life experience that too much of a good thing like stress can really cause some problems. So if we're going to say it really clearly, stress is an actually healthy part of your life. Stress is a normal part of every day, and it's not a bad thing. We tend to associate negative thoughts with stress, but actually stress is something helpful. So if we're going to change or modify our goal, if we were going to be a little bit clearer with our goal would be this: to learn to use your stress to be more productive and effective. Let me show you exactly how we're going to do that. Right here I have a graphic of a bell-shaped curve, and it's going to show you the relationship between healthy stress and unhealthy stress, and the relationship between productivity on one side of our graph and stress, the normal stress we think of, on the other side. In this basic bell-shaped curve, what we'll see is that when the stress is low, our productivity is low, and we have not much happening. But we all know that as we put a little pressure on ourselves, as we kind of come up on deadlines, we have to get things done, and then we start to see more and more productivity in our lives. Well, this productivity that happens when stress comes on us is what we call eustress. It's positive stress. It's stress that helps us get going. Well, there's a dark side to stress, and this is probably what we more associate stress with. It's called distress. And distress happens when we start pushing more and more stress on people, and they start dropping productivity. They get less and less and less done till they're all the way over on the other end of the continuum where nothing's happening. They can't focus. They can't concentrate. They can't even finish the end of their sentence. It's just too much stress, and the brain begins to short out. So really, what we're going to do with this webinar today, our goal for you, is to help you hit this high point. This is where you're at your peak performance. When your eustress is the highest and you haven't crossed over into distress, that's where we want you to be most of the time, because there you're getting a lot done and you're using stress in a positive way. Well, let's look at how we're going to do that. To understand our strategy, what we're going to do to help you deal with stress, you have to understand what are the 4 sources of stress. So here we have them. We have your environment. We have your thoughts. We also have your physical health and your emotional state. Those are the 4 elements where we see stress happening in your life. Now, to learn to balance those, we're going to use a metaphor throughout this workshop. And it's a metaphor of the stressmobile. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to imagine yourself as a vehicle driven by stress. And that shouldn't be hard, because that's pretty much the truth for all of us. We're all driven by stress. So this particular stressmobile, what it does is it has a lot of stress coming in through stressors in our environment. And that comes inside of us and it fills us up. And that stress then moves into what's called To talk about stress, we're going to use a metaphor. It's going to be a way that you can visualize and understand how we're going to combine these 4 elements to help you create a balanced place in your life of using enough stress to get you productive, but not too much that you're burning out. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at what's called our stressmobile. Now, it shouldn't be too hard for you to imagine yourself as a stressmobile because we really are all vehicles driven by stress. So let's go through the different parts of our stressmobile and see how it works. In our stressmobile, the first thing we see happening is that stress comes into our world. These are our stress bubbles. These are stressors, different events like pressure at work or maybe a conflict at home or maybe some kind of difficulties with your kids. Just normal everyday stressors. They come into our life and they fill us up. And they fill what we're going to be calling our stress container. Once the stress container gets full to a particular point, what will happen is that it will help push out the stress and move you forward. This is called our globalizer. The globalizer helps get you going. So stress pushes out the globalizers and moves us forward. So when everything is working great, we get a little stress. The stress gets us going and we move forward. But what if we don't have enough stress in our life? Remember that bell-shaped curve we looked at a little while ago? On the front end of it, there wasn't a lot of stress. And because there's not a lot of stress, not a lot of productivity. And that's where we get stuck. So here, this particular stressmobile, it has very little stress and really nothing coming out the globalizer. So it's really not going anywhere or doing anything. Well, what if we have too much stress? What if our stress is just over the top? Well, what happens is our stress container fills all the way up and it starts then pushing out another valve, which actually starts working against us. So we have stress pushing one direction and stress pushing the other direction. And it basically just kills our productivity. It kills us from moving forward. So what we're going to learn in this webinar is how to stay balanced, how to have enough stress to get us going and moving forward without too much stress. Well, again, to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the 4 factors that create stress in our lives. The first one's going to be the easiest. The first one's going to be the factors of our environment. And what our environment does is it produces stressors. Remember these little bubbles? The stressors are problems at work or conflicts with our relationship or maybe difficulty with our kids. And those stressors come pouring in our lives in different ways. 2 different things you can think about as stressors. One is demands, like this guy lifting weight. Man, that demand of lifting those weights are so hard and so heavy. It's creating a lot of stress for him. And we can see that and recognize that pretty easily. So increased workload, projects at home, maybe trouble with finances. All of that creates demands on us that tax us and stress us. But there's another kind of stress that happens in our world, and those are changes. Any kind of changes. New job, new home, new child, new relationship. Now, all those actually look at positive things. They look like good things. But what those changes also do is they produce stress. Any kind of change, positive or negative, in our life will produce stress for us. The reason for that, we can go to Sir Isaac Newton's law of inertia. Sir Isaac Newton basically said in this law of inertia that objects at rest like to stay at rest. And in the same way, objects in motion, they like to stay in motion unless they're acted upon by some outside force. So here we have this rock, and it's a big rock, and it wants to stay put. It doesn't want to move. It doesn't like to move. So in order to get this rock moving, we have to apply a lot of force. Well, that's the way it is with change. Something is changing. To get it to change, we have to apply force. And that force isn't necessarily unpleasant. It can be quite pleasant, but it's still force. So here's our first strategy for decreasing the stress in your life. Ready? Simply decrease the stressors in your life. Duh. Hello. Pretty obvious. If something's stressing you out, just get rid of it. Well, that's kind of more idealistic than really works in reality. It's easier said than done. If my boss gives me a new project and I say, I got too much stress in my life right now. I'm not interested. No thanks. Well, sometimes that's not an option. So dealing with our stress could be getting rid of excess stressors, but sometimes that's not always, and definitely not the only way to get rid of stress. Let's look at some other ways, but before we do, I want you to understand a couple different kinds of stress so we're clear what we're talking about. There's two kinds of stress I want you to think about. One is acute stress. And acute stress isn't like a little puppy or kitten. It's not adorable. Acute stress is time-limited stress. Stress that happens over a short or a quick period of time. Example of that would be this guy right here. He's feeling a lot of acute stress. He's going on a walk and then all of a sudden a dog comes out of nowhere and starts chasing him. And of course, he's running for his life. But there's going to be a time when the dog stops running and he's going to be safe. Then there's another kind of stress called chronic distress. And with chronic stress, there is continual stress. It doesn't stop. It doesn't recover. It's not like the dog who is here one moment and then gone. It's going on and going on and going on. And this really, the chronic distress, is where we need to focus because that's where the majority of our problems happen. Now, what's also interesting is that the chronic distress comes mainly not from our environment, but from our thoughts. So let's go back to our stress mobile and look at our thoughts. So let's say for a minute, I'm a police officer and it's my first day at the job. Well, it may be stressful because it's a change, because there's a lot of things I have to do. The environment itself is kind of threatening and scary. But over time, what will happen is I will adapt to it. And as a police officer, I'll become kind of normal to me, all the hassles and problems of being a police officer. And if I am well adjusted to my job, in 6 months or a year, it shouldn't be a big deal. But if I don't adjust to my job, mentally adjust to my job, then the stress that being a police officer is going to be for me is going to be chronic. It's not going to go away. And it's going to create problems. So when we're looking at chronic stress, we're really looking at how you think about things. It's not necessarily the environment. It's how we think about the environment. So let's look at that real quick. In our stress mobile, what we see stress coming in through the top. And then it goes through a thing called the thought transmutator. Isn't that great word? Thought transmutator. What the thought transmutator does is it takes our thoughts and either can make them bigger or it can make them smaller. If it takes one of these stressors and says, wow, this is huge, then it will be huge. Or if it says, it's not a big deal, then it will be not a big deal. Our thoughts will mutate the stressors coming in the door and really affect our stress level that way. Now, I'm going to give you 6 different strategies for healthy and unhealthy thinking so we can begin to look at what would it take to get rid of stress by simply changing the way we think. In this first diagram, we see 2 girls, both of them looking into glass. One of them, the glass is mirrored, so all she sees is herself. The other gal looking into glass, it's not mirrored, and she sees throughout to the outside world. Well, this is a great metaphor for a healthy way of thinking. When we're in an unhealthy thinking pattern, what we tend to do is we tend to believe that our thoughts are a reflection, or our stressors are a reflection of us. And we tend to what's called personalize those stressors. For example, if I got a speeding ticket or some traffic citation, then what would happen is that I would personalize it and say, oh, I got that traffic or speeding ticket because I'm a bad human being. And because I'm a bad human being, this is always going to happen to me. Those kind of thoughts create that kind of stress. But if we could look at it in a different way, if we could go back for a second and see the other side of it, look through the glass and see the rest of the world and see this traffic ticket as just one event and amongst a full day of events, well, then all of a sudden, it doesn't feel so bad. We're seeing all kinds of things. Yeah, I'm getting a ticket, but man, isn't it pretty outside? If you can make that mental shift, if you can look at the good and the bad simultaneously and see it all, and see it's not about you, then you'll be able to adapt to that stress and those stressors really quickly. There's another way that we look at stress that really helps empower us or disempower us. And that really is all about our power. Here we have two mirrors. One mirror, a guy looks into and he sees himself gagged and tied. He sees himself completely powerless. Another mirror, the guy looks in and he sees himself powerful. Well, those two different perceptions of how we see things has a lot to do with how stressed we feel. Study after study shows that if you see yourself in a situation and see yourself as powerless, your stress level is going to double, quadruple. But if you see yourself in a situation and you see yourself as powerful, somebody that can make influence and change, then you're going to feel a lot less stress. So for example, you've lost your job. And if you see yourself, oh my gosh, end of the world because you've lost your job, well then your stress levels are going to be out the door. But, however, if you see yourself as powerful, as you see yourself as, hey, I'm going to get another job, I'm going to do something great with my life, then your stress is going to be minimal and you will probably do some really great things. The third way that we look at things and the way we think about things has to do with time. Time is an interesting factor because if I look at something and I say, well, this is going to be forever, or this is going to go on for a long time, then where have I put myself? I've put myself in chronic stress. But if I say it's going to be a short period of time, it's really time limited, then I'm in the acute stress, the stress that I deal with and then move on. And that's really a key difference. So again, for example, I'm driving to work and I get a flat tire. And if I say, oh, this is going to ruin my day. Oh, this always happens to me. My life always has these problems. If I take that stressful situation of a flat tire and put it into a time frame of forever and for always, I am going to be extremely stressed out. However, there's another way of seeing it. If I look at that stressful event, I got a flat tire. I'm going to deal with it, I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to move on with my day. Then it's only acute stress. And I can do whatever I need to do and get going with the rest of my day. I don't have to worry about, oh, this is forever, this is for always. It's not going to happen. The third way that we can change our thinking to deal with our stress is to look at time, how we see time. Because how we see time very much changes it from chronic to acute stress. Let me give you an example. If I'm, again, driving home from work, and this time I get a flat tire, and I say to myself, oh, this always happens to me. Oh, this is just my luck. Or if I say, oh, I got a flat tire, I got to deal with it, and it's going to probably take me about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then I'll get on with the rest of my day. Well, those two very different ways of thinking about it really change the amount of stress we have. One, we're seeing it forever and we're creating a chronic stress situation. Well, the other one is, okay, what do we got to do? Let's take care of it. And it's short. It's going to happen. Got to take care of it. And then it's over. And again, that's the definition of acute stress. So if I can learn to see things, even difficult things, as this is hard, but it's not forever. It's only for a few minutes. There's a wonderful old scripture that says, this too will pass. If I can remember that small phrase, this too will pass, it will help my stress immensely. So look at these 6 different ways. 3 of them are healthy, 3 of them are not. Remember, see negative things as not a reflection of you, but just see them as part of life, a part of the bigger picture. Make sure you always see yourself as empowered, and make sure anything negative that happens, see it as temporary, short-lived. This too will pass. Now, let's look at our health, because our health plays a huge role in how stressed or distressed we may become. Here we have 2 stress mobiles. One of them is healthy and one of them is not. One of them has a very large stress container and it can hold a lot. The other has a narrow stress container and it's starting to spew out. What we're going to see in this narrowing of our stress container is that the same amount of stress we had before that wasn't pushing us over the edge is now pushing us over the edge. And we've all experienced this. A simple cold or flu brings our stress level up to, I just can't even do normal things. I just need to rest. I just need to sleep because I can't even handle sometimes even getting up because my body is so tired and it needs to rest. So I have to shut off all stress because my stress container just overflows so quickly. Well, one of the best ways to make sure my stress container stays full and I am able to get things done is by staying healthy. Because healthy people and unhealthy people handle stress very differently. In fact, the more healthy I am, the more stress I can take. The more unhealthy I am, the less stress I can take. So, it's a great philosophy, it's a great idea, it's a great premise, but there is a problem. And the problem is that busy habits are often bad habits. Let me tell you what I mean. When we're stressed, what we tend to do is we tend to reprioritize our day. We tend to handle things differently than if we weren't stressed. For example, if I have something really important to do, I may get up in the morning and instead of sitting around and reading the paper or just going through my computer emails, I may just jump out of bed, jump in the shower, and then head out right to work. Or maybe in the morning, I do my exercise, and that's when I just kind of burn off some stress. Well, if I'm got a lot going on, I'm going to skip that exercise and just rush to work because I got a lot to do. Well, I just took away one of my ways to help myself cope with stress. Other things I tend to do is I tend to eat poorly. You know, when I have time, I find cooking is really relaxing. But when I don't have time, I don't have time to cook. And so I grab things like fast food, hamburger, French fries, things like that. And I don't eat as healthily because I don't have the time to create something that's more healthy and fitting for me. So unfortunately, our hurried habits are unhealthy habits. When we're stressed, we tend to not do what we need to do. So, in order to expand our stress container, to get ourselves into a healthy place, 1, we need to eat right. We need to eat healthy foods. Stress burns off tons of calories and vitamins and nutrients. Those calories, vitamins, and nutrients need to be replaced. And eating right is going to replace them in the right way. Chronic stress is going to be totally cut in thirds if I can exercise. I mean, there are days when I exercise and I could feel my stress cutting in half because I'm out there burning it off. The other thing this picture is showing you is hydration. Proper drinking, making sure you get lots of fluid, will also really help in keeping healthy and decreasing your stress. The last thing I could recommend for you is get enough sleep. Oh boy, this is like the easiest one of all, but it's one we often skip. We often sleep less when we're stressed. Well, there was an interesting NASA study that was done just this last year, 2011, that took astronauts out of their work environment every day and gave them a 30-minute nap. And what they found was when they took people off the line, had them take a nap, when they came back, when they got back on the job, they were 33%, a third percent more effective than those people that had not taken a nap. Sleeping in the day or sleeping at night really helps boost your productivity. Honey, is your stress container full? Yes, that's why I'm so cantankerous. Well, let's talk a little bit about how stress affects our emotions and emotions affect our stress. Here we have two stress mobiles. Both of them have the same level of stress, but one of them is spilling out and the other one is not. Well, the big difference between these two is where their overflow valve is. See, on this one, her overflow valve is high, and she can function really well with some high stress. But on his overflow valve is lower, and because it's lower, he's spilling out much more quickly. Well, this overflow valve is called a stress discombobulator. The discombobulator is exactly what's happening when our stress starts spilling forward. It's discombobulating us. It's pushing us out of sync. It's moving us into the wrong direction. And that's what we got to do, is we got to make sure that our stress discombobulator is raised and healthy. Let me give you an example just by talking about the brain a little bit here. When our brain is only mildly stimulated, it's just kind of like that bell-shaped curve, and we don't see a lot of activity, just kind of relaxed, gelling. But as we stimulate our brain and get ourselves going, we get productive and we get effective. But if we stimulate our brain too much, we start to get too full of stress, and then we get discombobulated. We can't focus, we can't think, we can't get the job done. So again, the bottom line, gotta raise that stress discombobulator so we can deal with the stress in our lives. Here are 5 different things that you can do to help it. 3 of them are going to be super easy. Socialize, take breaks, relax a little bit. 2 others are going to be a little bit more work. Meditation. You have to learn and you have to dedicate the time to do it. And counseling. But all 5 of these things are just wonderful examples to help you deal with stress. Here's a simple way, a strategy. Imagine yourself at work and you're feeling discombobulated. You're just frazzled. What if you got up, took a break, walked over to the water cooler, and just started to socialize? Hang out with people. Talk about the day. Talk about life. And in the process, relaxed a little bit. Well, that simple 10-minute break is going to help you come back to your job and be more effective. The other thing that can really help you is counseling. Counseling is a way to help you deal with your feelings and emotions. Because there are feelings and emotions. Sometimes we don't know what to do with them. But some professionals can come in and help you, teach you strategies, help you process, do whatever you need to do to deal with the stress and the emotions that are overloading you. Now, let's just review real quick with our stress mobile. Stress comes in It comes in, it's part of life. It comes in through our thought transmutator and either gets bigger or smaller, and it fills our stress container. If it's filled to an appropriate level, we'll globalize, move forward. If it's filled too much, it'll discombobulate us and get us stuck. So what we want to do is always keep it in a balanced place. And we can do that by monitoring our stressors and the change in our life, by dealing with our thought transmutator in terms of the thoughts we have, by dealing with our stress container, making sure we stay healthy in our lives, and also dealing with our discombobulator, dealing with our feelings and emotions. Now, before you go, let me give you actually 2 practical tools that you can use to help yourself feel better. This particular first one I want to give you is interesting because it's basically just changing the way you think, changing the why in your head. So here we have a situation, and this gentleman's either coming from work or going to work, and he's in a traffic jam. And he is stuck behind some traffic, and all of a sudden, this guy over here on the left comes cutting in and cuts him off. And it just sends his stress out the door, and he is just so frustrated, so angry. He's discombobulated. And as you can see by his stress meter, it's way over on the red, and he's freaked. Well, what if we changed the why? Why did that guy cut him off? Why did that guy cut in front of him like that? Why did that happen? Well, if he's thinking negative things, he may say, this always happens to me. Or he may be even thinking hostile things like, that guy's a jerk, or that guy thinks he's more important than I am, or that guy, he just doesn't care about anybody else but himself. And we get agitated and we get frustrated. But what if we change the why? What if we changed the why he did it? Let's imagine for a minute in the same circumstance, in the same situation, and this guy cuts us off. And we think, okay, he's cut us off. I wonder what's going on in his world. I wonder if he had a really bad lunch. And now it's afternoon time and it's all coming out, and he's got to rush himself to the restroom, because if he doesn't have a restroom soon, he's going to have a huge problem. Wow. If that's what's going on for him, if that's why he's cutting me off, well then, good luck with you, man. Hey, hope you make it. And all of a sudden now, my stress level goes way down. I don't feel as agitated because I don't feel personalized. I don't feel like he's cutting me off. And it kind of made fun of it, kind of made fun of the circumstances. And that helps me feel better as well. So I want you to think about circumstances in your life and look at the why you give them and see if you can change some of the whys in your life. And what you'll do is, as you do, you'll see your stress decrease. Here's another situation that we're going to look at. In this particular situation, there's this young guy, and he's having problems with his boss. And he's imagining, his boss is so mad and so frustrated all the time that any second he's going to come up and say, "You're fired. You, door, go." And he is just stressed out the door. You can see he's just off the chart in terms of his stress meter. Well, in this particular story, what if he really became at peace with this whole fantasy of maybe he'd be fired? Maybe his boss is going to get upset. His boss is going to be mad. And he's going to say, "Hey, hit the door." So what? What's going to happen? What if he played that all the way through? Will he die? Will his family die? Will the world stop? No. What will happen is he'll have to go out and get another job. Is it the end of the world? Not at all. Not at all. And so what happens is he learns to accept and really become at peace with this frightening thought, this frightening fantasy of his. and not become so scared about the thoughts that he has and be at peace with it, what happens is that he calms down. And his boss may or may not calm down. His boss may or may not stop being angry or freaking out all the time. And his boss may or may not fire him. But he's not stressed because he's not afraid. He's not fighting it anymore. He's at peace with it. So I want you to look at the things in your life. What things can you look at, follow all the way through, get yourself out of that high stress mode, and look at and make peace with? Something, this would be an acute situation, something that I have to deal with, but I can, and I will, and I have, and then I'll move on with my life. I not only see it as short term, but I also see myself empowered, and I can deal with it. Well, thank you very much for being a part of this presentation. There's a lot more information and resources at MyExpertSolution, so we really hope that you come on and get on with our digital life skills coach and help yourself. There's an evaluation you could take. There's also workshops that we have that help you deal with stress in your life.